Ji-hoon, who has the ability to regenerate and dreams of becoming an invincible hunter, is stripped of the one thing he loves the most. Despair clings to him, and he is consumed by revenge, determined to destroy everything that stands in his way. This makes him Japan's #1 enemy. Will they be able to control him before it's too late? Follow to find out. 10 years ago, gates abruptly opened up all over the world. Through these gates, monsters started pouring out. Monstrous beasts, humanoid devils, and even ghostly dragons. Thankfully, on the human side, people known as the Awakened started appearing. These individuals began exhibiting supernatural powers, whether it was magic, martial arts, or other superhuman abilities. These Awakened became the hunters who hunted down the monsters. But for our protagonist, Kang Ji-hoon, none of this matters. A young teen, just minding his own business, finds his life shattered when a large block of diamonds slams into his face, knocking him back into the desks and chairs of the classroom. Blood pours from Ji-hoon's mouth and head, staining the floor. 3 other students stand over him, a brown-haired teen smirking down at him called Thor, another chewing gum, known as Sandman, and the leader, a white-haired teen with a diamond levitating above his arm called Crystal. Crystal calls Ji-hoon a worm and orders him to squirm. In this awakened specialization high school, Ji-hoon is nothing but a loser. His only ability? Regeneration, supposedly an S-rank power. Unluckily for Ji-hoon, his version of regeneration is a curse. Every time he heals, it hurts like hell. As his skull tries to repair itself, he screams in agony, flailing on the ground while his bullies laugh at him. Once he heals, there's no evidence of the attack, no proof of the bullying left behind. He has no choice but to endure. Even the teachers and the police do nothing. Why? Because S-class individuals like his bullies receive special treatment from the government. Thor, Sandman, and Crystal, with their powers over diamonds, electricity, and earth, are all S-class elites. After school, Ji-hoon heads home to the small restaurant his mom runs. She greets him warmly, giving him food. His mom is the only reason he continues to go to that high school, despite everything. His dad died when Ji-hoon was 5, leaving his mom to handle the restaurant and provide for them. So even when she asks how school is, Ji-hoon smiles and lies. He tells her everything is fine, but one day everything changes. On the 15th of the month, his mother's birthday, Ji-hoon's life comes crashing down. He stares in shock at his mother's unconscious body in the hospital. She's covered in bandages, a neck brace supporting her head, connected to oxygen. She had been brutally beaten, and now she's in a vegetative state. The government officials try to explain that it was an accident, but Ji-hoon knows better. Crystal and his friends came to their small restaurant that day. Crystal, thinking Ji-hoon's mom was attractive, tried to flirt with her, but when she accidentally swiped his phone off the table, cracking its screen, Crystal's power erupted in anger. Diamonds speared through the ground, lifting Ji-hoon's mom into the air. An accident? It was anything but that. Ji-hoon's face contorts in rage as blood drips from his nose, his teeth gritting so hard they crack and shatter. He grabs his neck, clawing at his skin, unable to contain the fury boiling within. His mother's birthday cake, left behind on the floor, is bathed in his blood. That night, in the mountains outside the city, the 3 bullies are hanging out, messing with their powers. Thor expresses some guilt, but Crystal brushes it off. They're young, protected by the law, and as awakened individuals, they have special privileges. Suddenly, from a distance, a voice calls out, "Ji-hoon." His eyes, filled with fury, glare at the bullies as he demands to know why they hurt his mom. Crystal recognizes him and mocks him, complimenting his mother's youthful appearance. Tears and snot run down Ji-hoon's face as he charges at them. Crystal lifts his hand, summoning a diamond spear that shoots straight through Ji-hoon's chest. Blood explodes everywhere as Ji-hoon pulls the spear out. His regeneration kicks in, healing the wound, but the pain rips through him as he writhes in agony. Despite the torment, he's ready to attack again. But Crystal has hundreds of diamond spears at his disposal now. With a flick of his finger, the spears rain down on Ji-hoon. Pinned to the ground like a human pincushion, his anger only grows. Crawling through the pain, he refuses to give in. Amused by Ji-hoon's persistence, Crystal orders Thor to finish him off. A bolt of lightning crashes down from the heavens, striking Ji-hoon where he stands. Smoldering, barely able to move, Ji-hoon still crawls toward them. Furious, Crystal covers his fists in diamond and pummels Ji-hoon's body, smashing down over and over again. Crystal uses his ability to trap Ji-hoon in a crystal coffin. Ji-hoon, grabbing a crystal spike, impales his own throat, his mind flashing to memories of his mother just before he dies. But Ji-hoon doesn't stay dead. The relentless cycle continues, his regeneration saving him, the pain growing worse each time. As Ji-hoon fights through his agony, his hatred burns brighter. And then a realization hits him. This helplessness, this endless torment is how his mother must feel. With newfound resolve, Ji-hoon grits his teeth and punches his way out of his diamond prison. Over time, as he regenerates and breaks his own body, he becomes stronger. His skeletal structure hardens. 5 long years pass. 5 years of nothing but pain and fury. A long time later, the mountains on the outskirts of the city are still as peaceful as ever. Meanwhile, the television in the city broadcasts an interview with some famous S-rank hunters. The interviewer even compliments his 3 guests, who are famous for their kindness and volunteer work. The guests explain that they feel joy whenever they help those in need, and they still feel that way. These 3 guests, Ji-hoon's former bullies, had now graduated and were working as S-class hunters, the best of the best. As for the next question, the interviewer asked them about an incident in their past when they hurt a civilian 5 years ago due to an ability outrage. The leader of the 3 hunters holds his head in grief as tears start flowing down his cheeks. He narrates how, when they were still students, he couldn't control his abilities well and accidentally hurt his friend's mom. He apologized to his friend, but he couldn't reach him since then. He was about to apologize again in front of the camera when the door to the interview area suddenly gets blown in, and it rockets right toward the hunters. Thankfully, Crystal manages to deflect the door with his arms, now reinforced with diamonds. The audience watching the interview scatters and shouts as a monster silhouette can be seen standing by the broken entrance. With every step of the monster, the floors break. Crystal warily watches the imposing figure approaching them when, in an instant, a fist suddenly flies to his face. In a flashback, we once again see Jae-hoon in his dining cocoon relentlessly and undyingly punching the diamond above him. He has no idea how much time has passed. Is it a few months? A few years? He will never know. The diamonds before him don't even show a scratch from all his punches, but there is one thing he noticed. His regenerative ability was different from others. The continued injuries triggered excessive regeneration, and he regenerated into a stronger person than before. Looking at his knuckles, he can see bones peeking through them. His exoskeleton was starting to come out. Inside that grave, for 5 years, Ji-hoon's whole body struggled. He used his feet, his back, and even his head. For 5 years, he destroyed his entire body and regenerated. He only felt pain. His blood splattered, his flesh ripped, his bones broke. The pain was his whole life, and when he regenerated, the pain was worse than death. Yet Ji-hoon continued on for 5 years until a crack formed. Back in the present, Crystal's face gets bludgeoned by a heavy skeletal fist, and he is flung back into the wall, crashing into it. His 2 sidekicks, Thor and Sandman, couldn't fathom what just happened or who this person was standing before them. A person looking more like a demon than a human, with an exoskeleton all over him, and even half his face masked with a skull. Ji-hoon recalls the last words these bullies told him 5 years ago, when they said he could try murdering them if he ever managed to escape his prison. Well, now Ji-hoon's rage is as fresh as ever, and he warns them that he finally got out. However, the bullies couldn't even remember this last interaction with Ji-hoon, let alone connect their weak classmate from the past to this imposing monster before them. They stare at each other in confusion while Crystal gets back up behind them. He orders them to just kill the guy, so Thor quickly summons a flash of lightning to strike the enemy. The resulting bolt of electricity causes a massive explosion of power and debris, but Ji-hoon endures the attack. Lightning still crackles all over his body, but he grins through it and charges at Thor. Ji-hoon lunges at Thor with his fists, using the blade-like bone protruding from his forearm to spear through Thor. The sharp weapon cuts through Thor's neck, and his decapitated head flies through the air, still showing a shocked expression. Crystal and Sandman are stunned by this shocking turn of events and can't even move as their friend's blood splatters over them. A few seconds later, after Thor's body hits the ground, Sandman finally manages to react. He sends his power toward Ji-hoon as pieces of rock, sand, and dirt converge and wrap around Ji-hoon, imprisoning and crushing him in a ball of earth. Ji-hoon grits his teeth once more, and in a counterattack, his prison explodes into 1,000,000 tiny pieces. In an instant, his fist holds Sandman by the jaw, popping the bubble gum he seems to have been chewing for 5 years. Sandman's mind goes into alarm at what is about to happen next as Ji-hoon tears off his jaw. Sandman falls to the ground, clutching his brutalized face while Ji-hoon lifts his sword arm to put him out of his misery. The blade slams into Sandman, finally ending his suffering. Crystal, now behind Ji-hoon with his fists ready to strike, prepares to attack. Ji-hoon turns to face him, but this only allows Crystal's diamond-laden fist to crash into Ji-hoon's face. Unlike before, the skull encasing Ji-hoon's face manages to pierce through Crystal's defenses. His diamond fists now have cracks running through them. Seeing this tragedy, Crystal lifts his hand and countless diamond spears appear. Unlike when they were, kids, when the spears just surrounded Ji-hoon, this time the spears are so large and numerous that they surround the whole building. Crystal brings down his finger and the innumerable spears come crashing down and converge on Ji-hoon, making him a human Pinkishin once more. Crystal stares at Ji-hoon's mangled corpse, but to his horror, the spikes spearing through Ji-hoon's body start to shake as he tries to stand again. Blood is pouring and dripping from his wounds, but this just makes Ji-hun look that much more menacing. Not only does he now look like a skeletal demon, but now he's bathed in blood and glaring menacingly at Crystal. Crystal realizes that this isn't over yet and encases his whole body in protective diamond armor. His fists become heavy diamond sledgehammers, and he starts pummeling Ji-hun. With every punch, both bone and diamond crack, and blood splatters all over. Crystal unleashes a combo of punches at Ji-hun, ending with a devastating blow to the head. However, just like back when they were teenagers, Ji-hun catches his fist with his mouth. He bites down on the diamond fist, and unlike before, when Ji-hun's teeth shattered, this time it is Crystal's arm that shatters. Crystal is horrified, realizing that he is no longer invulnerable to the monster before him. Ji-hun bites down hard on the arm and quickly punches his skeletal sword through Crystal's chest. Crystal tries to move away, but Ji-hun is still biting through his fist, and Crystal can only scream in pain from both attacks. In a desperate attempt to escape, Crystal touches the floor and summons a large stalagmite of diamond to sprout and spear through Ji-hun, dragging him into the air. But Ji-hun's bite on his arm is still so strong that Crystal is forced to cut off his own arm. Holding his now missing arm, Crystal hobbles away from the scene. Unfortunately for him, a diamond spike suddenly spears through him, forcing him to fall. Ji-hun had thrown one of Crystal's own spears at him. Ji-hun menacingly walks toward him, with Crystal screaming at the top of his lungs for him to stop. Of course, Ji-hun pays him no mind and stabs Crystal with the myriad diamond spikes he had created. Crystal now looks like a pinkishin. Weakly, he asks the monster before him who he is. In response, Ji-hun grabs hold of the skull covering half of his face and painfully peels it off. Crystal can finally see his whole face, and his mind immediately recalls who this person is. It was the weakling they tortured when they were teens and relentlessly called Worm. Half of Ji-hun's face might now be scarred underneath the skull mask, but this person is clearly him. Ji-hun doesn't respond to the insult, but simply raises his fists and strikes Crystal once more. He then grabs him by the throat and rams his skeletal sword through Crystal's mouth and out the back of his head. Ji-hun watches as the life slowly disappears from Crystal's eyes. After finally exacting his revenge, the rage seeps out of Ji-hun and he tiredly stands up. He surveys his surroundings and sees the 3 brutalized corpses of his former bullies, all lying in pools of their own blood. The whole auditorium has been destroyed in their fight, and Ji-hun is the only one left alive. The only movement he can see is his own reflection in the pools of blood. Above him, a gray sky peeks through the ruins of the building, and a torrent of rain starts to fall. Ji-hun falls to his knees, looks up at the rain, and feels the water running over him. He releases a blood-curdling scream and starts to cry, realizing that after 5 years of nothing but mindless pain, he doesn't know what to do next. A little while later, Ji-hun is sitting in a hospital with a warm blanket covering him. He stares at the prone figure lying on the hospital bed and can't believe that his mother is still alive. Somewhere, under a clear blue sky in the middle of the forest, there flickers a gate to another world. Inside this portal is a dark green cave where a group of hunters is just finishing up a monster hunt. The 4 men commend the girl and their group, as it was her first time going that deep into the gate, and yet she still contributed greatly to the team. The girl bashfully thanks her comrades for looking out for her. However, her gratitude quickly turns to horror when she notices the 4 men now encircling her, their expressions dark and their eyes filled with sinister intent. One of the men smirks, restraining her hands as he caresses her face. He tells her that they are far more grateful for her accompanying them, reminding her that no one will know what happens inside the gate. The girl begins shaking in terror. The muscular man was about to lick her face when, all of a sudden, his head is sliced clean off and rolls to the ground. The other men are horrified by the sudden attack. They frantically look around, trying to spot their attacker. Meanwhile, the girl is stunned as her savior steps forward, a humanoid figure encased in an exoskeleton embodying the terrifying name of a true monster hunter. The 3 remaining male hunters quickly respond to the presence of the monster, burying him with a barrage of attacks. One of them summons multiple fireballs, while another conjures a spear of darkness, and the last brandishes a katana. Fire and dark magic explode violently, striking Ji-hun, but the attacks barely scratch his exoskeleton. The samurai charges and stabs his katana into Ji-hun's chest, but to his horror, the katana shatters on impact. In a single swift counterattack, Ji-hun destroys the samurai. The 2 remaining hunters, now fully gripped by fear, cannot fathom how such a powerful monster exists within the gate. Ji-hun, unfazed, lazily swings his sword, decapitating both men in one strike, leaving only the girl alive. The girl, shaking and crying in fear, looks up at the monster who had just saved her. She wipes her tears away and thanks him, her voice trembling with emotion. However, her gratitude is abruptly cut short as her head is swiftly sliced off by Ji-hun. He had attacked once more, mercilessly ending her life. But why did he do this? To answer that question, we must go back to a few days ago. Ji-hoon was still crying in the auditorium, standing over the bodies of those he had murdered. Suddenly a voice spoke to him from afar. "What you did was amazing," the voice said. "How do you feel now that you've gotten your revenge?" The voice belonged to a blonde-haired woman standing by the door. Ji-hoon asked, "Who are you?" The woman introduced herself as Sim Jian, South Korea's Hunter Association head. Ji-hoon demanded to know how she knew about him, and her response shocked him. "I've been watching you ever since the incident 5 years ago," she explained. Realizing she was talking about his mother, Ji-hoon's rage surged again, and he charged at her. The auditorium exploded with force as he barreled toward her, ready to strike her down. Just before his attack landed, she spoke calmly. "I can save your mother." Those words froze Ji-hoon's fist in midair. The shockwave of his halted attack sent debris and rubble flying through the corridor. He hesitated, his rage momentarily held back, and he asked, "What do you mean?" Simjian clarified, "I can wake your comatose mother. After all, I am the only S-rank healer in the world." Ji-hoon, having learned from his past mistakes, wasn't ready to trust her easily. "How do I know I can trust you?" he asked. Simjian laughed mirthlessly and said, "You don't have to take my word for it. I was the one keeping your mother alive while you were trapped beneath the earth for 5 years." Thinking it over, Ji-hoon asks her what she wants with him. Jian smiles and tells him that there is currently a problem with the world situation. The hunters that sprouted all over different countries are now too strong. Most military forces are no match for hunters, and there are even hunters stronger than nuclear forces. Thanks to these strong hunters, the monsters inside the gates have mostly been killed. However, the gates still did not disappear. Now, without monsters, they are being used as pathways by different countries. Nations are using them to wage wars, and the soldiers for these wars are the hunters. Unfortunately for them, South Korea doesn't have enough hunters and couldn't stop the Japanese hunters from invading. That is, until Ji-hoon appeared. If South Korea were to respond to Japan with their own hunters, it would become total war. But a monster attacking hunters shouldn't be a problem. That is why Jian is asking Ji-hoon to be their monster, all in exchange for saving his mother. Back inside the gate, the group of hunters that Ji-hoon just got rid of were the first of his Japanese victims. It was a beautiful summer day in Japan. However, something was brewing inside a particular glass building, the Prime Minister's official residence. Inside, the Prime Minister of Japan has summoned the Minister of Defense to ask him some questions. The old man has his hands clasped before him and calmly asks the young Minister of Defense if there are strong monsters inside the gates. When the Minister of Defense answers in the negative, the Prime Minister then asks him if there are strong hunters in South Korea. The Minister of Defense replies, "No," once again. The Prime Minister suddenly slams his fist on the table and demands to know why their hunters haven't taken over the Korean peninsula, if there are no monsters or Korean hunters standing in their way. The veins on his bald head bulge with irritation as he demands an answer from his subordinate. This old, menacing-looking man is Rizaki Judo, the leader of Japan as its prime minister. The Minister of Defense apologizes to his superior and promises to rectify the issue. When Prime Minister Judo asks how he plans to do that, the Minister of Defense smiles and declares that he himself will take care of it. This young man is Japan's #1 hunter and Minister of Defense, Ikosai Kajuru. With his simple cape, gold bracers, and one singular earring, Kajuru doesn't look like the dangerous hunter that he actually is. A singular lock of white hair in the shape of the moon is prominently displayed above the rest of his dark hair, hinting at his style and technique. After his meeting, Defense Minister Kajiru orders his secretary to prepare his sword. He will go alone inside the gates. His secretary nervously remarks that the hunters they sent inside the gates were all lost, so it would be wise for him to go along with others. However, Kajiru stops walking and asks her if he looks like the person who would need something like that. Sensing his dangerous aura, the secretary quickly apologizes and prepares his sword. A few hours later, Kajiru passes through the gate in Japan's countryside and is now in the lands beyond. He walks through the cave where the other Japanese hunters went missing and wonders what could have happened to his useless subordinates. Numerous weak and small monsters attack him, but he just cuts them to ribbons with his sword. He knows that his subordinate hunters couldn't have died against weak monsters like those. While wondering what could possibly be inside the cave, he finally gets to the end. Inside, the bloody corpses of Japanese hunters are piled up on one another, and sitting on top of them is a humanoid skeletal monster. Fury envelopes Kajiru, and in one quick motion, he draws his sword from its sheath and strikes at the monster. To his utter surprise, his sword is stopped by the monster's own skeletal sword attached to its hand, and its armored forearm. Kajiru is insulted that this measly monster dares to block his sword, and he fluidly dodges the monster's attack. He He counterattacks by punching the monster's chest, creating some distance between them, and prepares his sword for one of his techniques. In one continuous motion, he utilizes one of his skills, Cage Ryu, First Moon, and slices at the monster. Despite managing to block it, the monster is blown back by the strength of the attack and coughs up blood. Kojiru isn't finished yet and releases his second technique, Second Moon. The pure energy released by his sword directly impacts the skeletal monster, blowing it once again into the cave wall. Kojiru compliments the monster's sturdiness for still being in one piece. He uses his third technique, Third Moon, to slash at the monster against the wall. This time, the monster manages to dodge his sword and attack with its own. The skeletal sword is about to hit Kojiru on the neck and decapitate him when he nonchalantly reverses the direction of his katana and chops off the monster's arm. The skeletal monster's exoskeleton might be sturdy, but he tells it that his katana can slice even through diamonds. With that, he decapitates the skeletal monster, who falls to the ground. Kojiru sheathes his sword while wondering how the elite hunters of his country lost to something like this. He is about to walk away, leaving Ji-hoon's body and decapitated head on the cave floor. Ji-hoon's eyes are blank, as if he is genuinely dead, but inside his mind is remembering his childhood, especially his dad. His dad was always busy because of work, but he was a very warm and friendly man. Ji-hoon had always liked that about him. One day, he and his mom happily welcomed his dad home from work with a box of fried chicken. He ran across the street to hug his father, not noticing the incoming truck. His dad dropped the chicken and came running toward him too. The last thing he saw of his father alive was him pushing him back into the truck's headlights, bathing his father in light. His dad passed away because of him. With his death, his business went under and Ji-hoon and his mom ended up with a huge debt. His mom's soft hands became rough from scrubbing dishes and working in their dwindling restaurant. When he asked his mom if she was okay, she always just kindly smiled at him and assured him that she was fine. But every night, Ji-hoon knew the truth. He couldn't sleep, and tears fell from his eyes because he could hear his mom silently crying beside him. His mom was crying, and it was all because of him. Days later, he realized that someone like him shouldn't live anymore, and his shaking hands held a box cutter. A few minutes later, his mom was bringing him dinner when she abruptly dropped the tray upon seeing what her son was doing. Ji-hoon was crying but smiling as he held his injured hand before him. He happily tells his mom that he might be awakened. His wrist slowly heals and the TV blares about an interview with Korea's #1 hunter, a crystal named Jim Gang. Ji-hoon hugs his mom and declares that just like the guy on the TV, he'll become a hunter and make them rich and happy. But that's not what happened. Years later, his mom is comatose in the hospital. This memory brings life back to Ji-hoon's eyes. He also recalls his conversation with Jian, where she told him that the world's balance is already broken. Many nations have already been conquered by hunters. Currently, their biggest enemy is Japan. That's why they wanted him to become their country's monster and hunt Japan's strongest hunters. While he had just fought with one of Japan's strongest hunters, Kojiru was trying to think of what his next move would be. Kojiru mindlessly realizes that he used up too much time with the skeletal monster, and it looks like he'll have to go to South Korea himself to capture the country. Meanwhile, he doesn't notice that Ji-hoon's decapitated head is slowly moving behind him and crawling toward him. He only finds out when Ji-hoon suddenly bites through his leg, surprising him. Looking at the head attacking him, Kojiru can see a new skeleton growing out of it, and he realizes that his enemy must have regeneration. This doesn't make sense though, since he already cut off the head. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon continues to chomp down on Kojiru's leg, eliciting a painful scream from him. Kojiru slices Ji-hoon's face, escaping his bite, and finally takes Ji-hoon seriously. A moon forms on Kojiru's forehead, his eyes light up like lightning, and moonlight reflects through his sword. The symbol of his technique illuminates the very ground they are standing on, and in an instant, Kojiru vanishes. Ji-hoon can only sense flickers of Kojiru running around him. Kojiru then activates his most powerful attack, Kojiru, Fatal 12th Moon. The numerous silhouettes of Kojiru simultaneously attack. Ji-hoon can't even react as his whole body gets minced by Kojiru's katana. The pressure waves created by his technique are so powerful that the slashes travel and reverberate throughout the tunnel and into the gate. The slashes escape the gate, back to Earth, and the whole forest mountainside is devastated by the attack. On the other side of the gate, inside the cave, the roof is carved with moonlight patterns and the floor is diced. Meanwhile, Kojiru shakily walks away from his devastating attack, still enduring the injury on his ankle. He realizes that he might need healing when all of a sudden a spike of bone hits his other leg. He nervously laughs while behind him, the skeletal hand from which the bone spike erupted is shakily pointing toward him. Attached to the skeletal hand is a battered yet menacing-looking skeleton still trying to crawl toward him. Kojiru shakes from the attack and the realization that Ji-hoon is still regenerating. He cannot believe that Ji-hoon is still trying to fight, despite the large difference in strength between them. He grips his katana once more and charges back at Ji-hoon with a shout. A few days later, the gate in the countryside of Japan is surrounded by numerous hunters. The Ministry of Defense's elite hunters are all there, and with his arms crossed is Japan's Prime Minister himself, Judo. Beside him, Kajiru's secretary asks the Prime Minister if they really need that much firepower. Prime Minister Judo replies that it's been 3 days since Kajiru went in. Since he still hasn't returned, they need to check on him. After all, Kajiru is still Japan's #1 hunter. All of a sudden, his speech is interrupted when a head rolls out of the gate. It is Kajiru's head. Then a skeletal monster walks out of the gate and into Japan itself. Judo is shocked by this sudden turn of events, but his head abruptly flies off, detached from his body. Meanwhile, back in South Korea, a conversation is being held at the Korean Hunter Association headquarters. A subordinate is telling Jin that since Ji-hoon murdered Jim Gang's son, it would be bad if he found out. Is that a good enough reason to send Ji-hoon to Japan? Jin smiles and replies to her subordinate, asking whether he isn't even remotely curious who would win, the ever-regenerating Ji-hoon or Japan's strongest hunter. In Japan, Prime Minister Judo's head abruptly reattaches itself to his body, and his flaming fist suddenly punches Ji-hoon to the ground. The punch causes an explosion so large that it seems a comet has fallen right at the two combatants. Ji-hoon is now unconscious on the ground, with Judo standing over him, lava dripping from his fists and burning holes throughout his clothes. After all, Judo is not just the Prime Minister of Japan, he is also an SSS rank hunter, Japan's #0. His bald head is flaming with anger, while the cut on his neck has already miraculously healed, thanks to the magma-like nature of his body. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon lies before him, defeated and stunned by Minister Judo's singular but powerful attack. In the story, we see that 3 years ago, all the monsters were eliminated from the small gates around the world, and humanity began to fear the hunters because they were incredibly powerful. As a result, some countries attempted to eliminate the hunters. They fired missiles at them and tried every possible way to get rid of them, but they failed miserably. On the other hand, when the other hunters saw all this, they made a deal with the government that they would either coexist or take control of the country through their power. In both scenarios, the hunters achieved supremacy. The first country that the hunters conquered was Japan. The reason for this was that Japan's Prime Minister, Judo, was an SSS rank hunter. Even before gaining his powers, he was extremely aggressive, and when the hunter system was introduced, he tried to take control of South Korea. But his plan failed due to a single monster. At that moment, we see Ji-hoon using his regeneration power to heal himself and standing up. Then, Japan's hunters, along with Prime Minister Judo, come forward and his disciples observe that he is using regeneration power. Among them is a 7th rank hunter named Jodomaru and an 8th rank hunter named Daku. Both say to Prime Minister Judo, "Leave this to us, we can handle it." Jodomaru states, "This is just a pathetic monster that can only regenerate." Daku adds, "What if I cut off your head?" But just then, Ji-hoon charges forward and grabs Jodomaru by the face, simultaneously decapitating Daku with a swift strike. Seeing this, Jodomaru is momentarily shocked, as Ji-hoon crushes his head with his own hands, turning it into mush. Everyone is stunned to see how powerful Ji-hoon is. He stands over the crushed head of Jodomaru, blood splattered everywhere, and the other hunters, filled with rage, are infuriated that he has done this to one of their own. At that moment, Prime Minister Judo declares, "Now, if anyone takes a step forward, I will take their life." Everyone is shocked, wondering why Prime Minister Judo is saying this. He glares at Ji-hoon, remembering his disciple, and flashes back to a winter's day. Snow is falling as Prime Minister Judo approaches a child who is shivering in the cold. Judo sits down beside the child and asks, "What are you doing here, kids?" The child, trembling from the cold, asks, "Who are you?" Prime Minister Judo replies, "I am a hunter. It's very cold. Come with me." He then asks the child for his name. The child answers, "My name is Ikosai Kajiru." The scene shifts back to the present, where Ikosai Kajiru's head lies on the ground. Seeing this, Prime Minister Judo becomes furious, and flames seem to emanate from his face. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon has a slight smile on his face. Prime Minister Judo launches a powerful attack against Ji-hoon, who manages to block it with ease. However, the attack is so powerful that Ji-hoon is forced to fall back. Prime Minister Judo charges forward and begins to strike Ji-hoon repeatedly. With each hit, Ji-hoon's body becomes more battered. Prime Minister Judo's relentless assault causes Ji-hoon's eyes to pop out and roll away. Then, Prime Minister Judo performs a devastating lava attack that turns everything to ash, leaving the remaining hunters in awe of his strength. They say to each other that they expected nothing less from Prime Minister Judo, hoping he would turn this monster to dust. Standing over the remains, only the bones of Ji-hoon are left, while everything else has been burned away. As Prime Minister Judo reaches down to pick up Ikosai Kajiru's head from the ground, he suddenly senses something. Ji-hoon is using his regeneration power, healing himself. Prime Minister Judo looks on in shock. Suddenly, we are shown a flashback where many corpses lie around, and Prime Minister Judo says, "Now, no one will stand with us." Standing among the bodies, he tells someone, "I'm sorry you had to go through all this." Ikosai Kajiru replies, "It's all right. We barely managed to conquer only Japan, and now we need to take control of South Korea and China." Prime Minister Judo tells Ikosai Kajiru that this time he might even die. If he wants to go, he can. Ikosai Kajiru responds, "You were the one who saved me when I was freezing to death on the streets. I can't repay you this debt in my lifetime, so I won't leave your side. But I want one thing. Once everything is over, can I call you my father?" Ikosai Kajiru, who has a deep sense of gratitude, replies, without asking, "I already consider you my son." Hearing this, Ikosai Kajiru is deeply moved and astonished. Once again, we shift back to the current story, where Prime Minister Judo is creating extreme heat due to the lava, and the lava is moving toward the other hunters. One hunter, named Haname, uses her ice power to freeze the lava and creates an ice wall around her teammates. Seeing the flames coming from Prime Minister Judo's body, Ji-hoon steps forward, placing his foot on the lava. Just then, Prime Minister Judo unleashes his most dangerous attack, one that will vaporize every cell in the body. This attack is called magma synthesis, and he directs it toward Ji-hoon, launching a series of flames that begin to burn him. Only Ji-hoon's bones remain. Everything else has been reduced to ash. Prime Minister Judo then targets Ji-hoon's bones with another attack, intending to turn even those to ashes. All the hunters are astonished to see the strength of Prime Minister Judo's attack, which has created a crater in the ground filled with lava. As the lava surrounds him, Ji-hoon finds himself engulfed in flames. At that moment, Prime Minister Judo calls for one of his students, Haname. She immediately responds, saying, "Yes, sir." Judo instructs her, "Now it's your turn. Use your powers to freeze the lava." Haname activates her abilities, and she begins to freeze the entire area around them, encasing the lava in a thick layer of ice. Prime Minister Judo turns his gaze away, saying, "Let him be trapped in this lava." Ji-hoon is burning badly in the lava, and they intend to confine him there forever, to let him burn endlessly. Then, the scene shifts to South Korea, where a building named Kumkong Guild is shown. Inside, a girl uses her powers to treat a man, and just then, the man's eyes open wide. The scene shifts back to the present battle. Prime Minister Judo tells the other hunters only the minimum number of people will stay here, and the rest should leave. They respond with a respectful, "Yes, sir." Suddenly, Ji-hoon regenerates again, emerging from the lava. He mutters to himself, "Lava like this inside a blood gate is something I've experienced tens of thousands of times." His flesh and skin continuously melt in the lava, but his regenerative powers instantly heal him, though the pain is unbearable. The pain was never easy to bear, he thinks to himself. Despite being burned to ashes, Ji-hoon still rises from the lava, his body in constant agony. Haname notices this and is frozen in fear, stunned by the sight of Ji-hoon regenerating again. Ji-hoon starts advancing towards them, still crying out in pain. Prime Minister Judo, sensing the danger, tells Haname, "Take the hunters with you and hide somewhere safe." Then, with a swift motion, Judo jumps into the lava crater to confront Ji-hoon head on. Haname watches Judo confront the monster, feeling emotional as memories of the past flood her mind. She remembers a time when she warned him, "You need to stop. You're overdoing it. Your magma regeneration ability is not omnipotent. You'll die if you don't stop." Judo had replied with a serious expression, "The four great hunter nations are the USA, China, Russia, and Japan. Out of them, Japan is the weakest. If we can't absorb South Korea, there's no way Japan can survive." Haname had moved closer to Judo and hugged him from behind, pleading, "But how many of our hunters will have to die for this?" Judo's response was resolute. "I can only fight by myself. Even if my body gets destroyed, I will protect my country." Back in the present, Judo launches a powerful attack at Ji-hoon, causing a massive explosion. The blast sends shockwaves across the battlefield. Judo continues to land punches on Ji-hoon, breaking his ribs with each strike. With a powerful blow, Judo throws Ji-hoon back. Ji-hoon struggles to steady himself, but Judo unleashes a powerful magma attack, sending a massive wave of flame and lava toward him, burning him to ashes once more. Ji-hoon screams in agony. Judo leaps into the air and descends on Ji-hoon with a crushing blow, seemingly annihilating him. Meanwhile, Haname tells the other hunters that Prime Minister Judo has ordered us to evacuate to a safe place. I will stay, but you all must leave. The other hunters hesitate but eventually say, Prime Minister Judo has helped us in our times of need. We've decided we will protect him until the very end. They bow before Hanim, calling her the Prime Minister's wife. As Judo continues his full-power assault, flames surge from the volcano. Judo grabs the remains of Jihung, smashing them until they vaporize into the air. Hanem and the other hunters watch from the edge of the volcano, but suddenly Judo is shocked. From the vapor, Jihung begins to regenerate once again, launching himself towards the hunters. To Judo's horror, Jihung heads straight for Hanem. Just as he is about to reach her, she removes her gloves, preparing to use her ice abilities, but to her shock, Jihung grabs her hand and pulls her towards him. The other hunters, stunned, watch as half of Jihung's body becomes encased in ice. Judo, enraged, yells at Jihung and commands the other hunters to attack him. They prepare their assault, but they are surprised by the intensity of Judo's anger. Moving swiftly, Judo cuts off Jihung's arm to save Hanem. However, in a devastating counterattack, Jihung decapitates Judo, severing his head from his body. Hanem is stunned, watching in horror as Judo's headless body falls on top of her. The other hunters, shocked by what they just witnessed, unleash a barrage of attacks on Jihung. Hanem uses her freezing powers to encase Jihung's entire body in ice. Together, their combined attacks shatter Jihung's body into pieces, breaking him apart like ice crystals. The hunters stand tall, believing they have finally won the battle. One of them asks Hanem, Prime Minister's wife, "Are you all right?" But Hanem is still in shock, staring at Judo's lifeless body, unable to believe that he is dead. She begins to cry, desperately trying to reattach Judo's severed head to his body, but it is no use. Through her tears, she tells the hunters, "Judo, he's no longer with us." Suddenly, to everyone's horror, Jihung regenerates once again. Without giving them a moment to react, he charges toward the hunters, ready to attack. Tears were dripping down from Hanaim's eyes as she saw the terrifying monster standing in front of her. She began to lose consciousness, her vision fading. When she slowly opened her tired eyes, she saw Judo lying down on a bed in front of her. He asked, "Hanim, are you awake?" Without hesitation, she tightly hugged him, calling his name Judo. But Judo looked at her in shock, confused, and asked, "Hanem, what happened?" She told him, trembling. "I had a horrible nightmare." Hanem looked at him with love in her eyes, and Judo gently reassured her, "Everything is okay. You don't need to worry. I'm with you." Hanem, filled with relief, leaned in and started to kiss him. But as she opened her eyes during the kiss, she was horrified. The face she was kissing was not Judo's, it was his frozen head. Her tongue was stuck to the frozen head of Judo, and she was paralyzed with terror. In front of her stood Jaihung, now a complete monster, having slaughtered all the hunters. Their dismembered bodies lay scattered around the battlefield. Seeing the horrific scene, Hanem, in shock, used her ice abilities and touched her own face, freezing herself completely into ice. Jihung, with monstrous eyes, stood amidst the carnage. The bodies of the hunters lay lifeless on the ground, and he could only wonder to himself, "What have I become?" Conflicted and tormented by his transformation, he began to walk toward the green portal gate. Meanwhile, in South Korea, at the Kumkang Guild, the scene shifts. Inside the building, in the monostone storage room, a female hunter turns to Han and says, "You can't push yourself too hard. You're the only one with any mana left. We barely saved you." With a trembling voice, she tried to tell him about their friends, but Han interrupted. I know they're running out of mana." They both stood in silence, staring at the mana stone. And Han is the crystal man from the last part. Han thought to himself, Why did that brat I used to play with when we were younger? How did he escape from the blood gate and kill me? Gritting his teeth in frustration, he muttered, "That worm bastard." Han, the Kumkang Guild master and an S-rank hunter, clenched his fists. The girl beside him asked, "Are you okay?" Han replied calmly, "Yes, everything's fine." Then he turned to her and said, "Release the seal." The girl is exhausted and sweat is dripping from her body due to fatigue. She says to Han, "I've broken the seal." Han responds, "Then summon all the members of our guild here." We are then shown that all the guild members have gathered. One of them bows his head and says, "We are at your service, master." Another member says, "I thought the master had died." To this, another member replies, "The vice guild master brought him back to life." At that moment, Kyung-chan, the guild's head of intelligence and an S-rank hunter, speaks up. "The monster has gone into the gate after massacring people in Japan." Kyung-chan further adds, "You called us here, which means you want us to kill this monster. We swear we'll help you, even if it costs us our lives." Suddenly, Han steps forward and decapitates Kyung-chan. The rest of the members are shocked by what they see. Han begins absorbing him. The other members stand by in disbelief as Han says, "This was the former vice president of the Korean Hunter Association. Since I joined the association 3 years ago, our guild has begun dominating Korea. As Han absorbs Kyung-chan's power, telekinesis, and S-rank ability, he starts bending and breaking another member with just a flick of his fingers, sending blood splattering onto the others. The girl then asks Han, was breaking the seal really necessary for you? Your ability is cursed." Han responds, "No, this is the best ability." Han then asks the remaining members, "Will you help me?" and begins killing them one by one. The remaining members attempt to flee. There were a total of 1,528 members. Han kills them all and starts absorbing their powers. Tears flow from his eyes, overwhelmed by the joy of gaining so much power. The girl, unable to bear the massacre, covers her eyes with her hands. She asks Han, "Are you all right?" Han responds coldly, "No. That monster killed an SSS-ranked prime minister." Sitting atop a mountain of corpses, Han says, "This power is still not enough. I need to gather more power. It's not enough to kill that monster." Angrily, Han declares, "I will kill that worm at any cost." His face is covered in blood splatter, and he yells, "I'm coming for you, Russia. Prepare to die, monster." Then we're shown a shipping port where a green portal appears, and a girl is standing in front of it. Ji-hun steps out of the portal, and the girl welcomes him. The scene shifts to a large building where the girl is treating Ji-hun's mother. She says, "My S-rank ability will heal every damaged cell one by one using my mana." Ji-hun looks at his mother and tells himself, "No matter how long it takes, I'll save my mother at any cost." The girl, trembling and weak, steps out and tells him, "If I continue the treatment like this every day, your mother will regain consciousness by next week. She's so weak that she collapses to the ground." Ji-hun asks her, "It seems like you're using too much mana. Why are you pushing yourself so hard?" She grabs his hand and says, "You must survive at all costs." But suddenly green light begins emitting from Ji-hun's hand, and he pulls it away. The girl tells him, "Just as I thought, your monster transformation is accelerating because of the blood gate." She further explains, 15 years ago, when the first gate opened, all the other gates gradually started turning into blood gates. But since you survived the blood gate, the rate at which green gates are turning into blood gates has accelerated. That's why most gates in the world have now become blood gates. She continues, "The mana flowing from these gates is what gives you your power. If we understand the flow of mana, we see that a normal gate is like a hole, while a blood gate is like a passage. These gates are connected to something, and something is coming through them, something that is searching for you. More and more monsters are emerging from the blood gates, and they are ridden by skeletal creatures resembling humans. These gates have appeared all over the world, and people are looking at them, wondering what these things are." The scene then shifts to the president's office in Korea, surrounded by a barrier. The president slams his hand on the table and shouts, "What is happening here? Has there been any response from the Kongjayam guilds?" The secretary, trembling, says, "All the guild members are dead." The president asks, "Why? How? What happened?" The secretary replies, "I don't know. We haven't received any information." The secretary then asks, "What should we do now? Should we seek help from others?" The president responds, "No, that would be suicide." He instructs the secretary, "First, declare martial law." The secretary replies, "The military won't be able to do anything. These monsters are too dangerous." The president says, "We have to do something." Grabbing his head in frustration, he says, "The Kangjayam Guild wasn't everything. We still have other options. We have other guilds, like the second-ranked guild in Korea, Dosa Guild. There's an air-ranked hunter there named John Woo-jin, and another air-ranked hunter named Kang Se-hee. Then there's the third-ranked Bengal Guild with 2 air-ranked hunters, including Superwoman. And the fourth-ranked guild, Younghak Guild, has 2 air-ranked hunters," he continues. "But they've all been killed. A monster from the blood gate connected to the gate itself was huge. It killed everyone." Ji-hun thinks to himself, "What is all this nonsense? Is this all because of me?" The girl asks Ji-hun, "What will you do now?" In the next scene, a girl is lying on the street, and a monster is about to kill her. Ji-hun quickly rushes forward and slices the monster in half with his skeletal sword, which is attached to his body. Ji-hun thinks, "When I died inside the blood gate, its mana tried to turn me into a monster. I barely resisted. As a result, I thought I had gained normal regenerative abilities, but that's not what happened. It's the mana from the blood gate that won't let me die until I fully become a monster." Ji-hun clenches his teeth and says, "All I wanted was a peaceful life, after saving my mother." He punches another monster, shouting, Why won't you all leave me alone?" and tears the monster apart. Meanwhile, someone is watching Ji-hoon through a blood gate from the other side. He says, "Is this him?" He sits on a throne made of skeletons and thinks, "Is he the one who caused the crack?" Ji-hoon says he will eliminate all the monsters and asks Sim Ji-hoon to keep healing his mother in a safe place. Sim Ji-hoon understands his plan and agrees, saying she will continue healing her from the association's underground bunker. Meanwhile, she mentally urges him to fight hard for the sake of his mother. Ji-hoon reflects that these monsters seem familiar, realizing they are the same ones he fought continuously for 5 years inside the Bloodgate. He remembers that, after a certain point, the monsters stopped coming. He thinks that if he can eliminate all of them, he might finally live peacefully with his mother. Suddenly, a bullet strikes his head. When he turns around, he notices it's the army. One of the soldiers remarks that he only eliminated monsters, but another replies that it doesn't matter and says he is the cause of the situation, and we will contain him until Hunter support arrives. This surprises Ji-hoon a bit, but he has no time to think as several tanks fire upon him. The attacks impact him hard, and he screams in pain, mentally affected. In that moment of agony, his vision starts to fade, and when he regains it, he is standing in front of a red gate, which has started reacting to his presence. He recalls Sim Ji-hoon's warning that being near a blood gate could make it difficult to suppress his transformation into a monster. In that moment, he sees something and remembers suffering from attacks by his tormentors, while a blonde boy looked on. The memory shifts, and he recalls a time when that same boy complained, saying Han was a bastard and asking why he was always the target. Ji-hoon replied that he was an easy target, and added that if things continued this way, the boy would get hurt too, asking him to avoid acknowledging him at school. The blonde boy, annoyed, grabs Ji-hoon by the shirt, questioning if he's crazy. Ji-hoon averts his gaze, saying, "Forget it, just leave." The blonde boy, frustrated, walks away. Reflecting on this, Ji-hoon recalls that he once thought of the blonde as his childhood friend. At least, he had. However, the boy had secretly been gathering evidence of the bullying since he could record everything he saw with his right eye. The blonde sent this evidence to the police, the education office, and news agencies. The day after, Ji-hoon was discovered, and his right eye was taken as punishment. Enraged, Ji-hoon confronted the boy, but the boy said he didn't think they could continue being friends. Ji-hoon realized that Han was behind the betrayal. The blonde, trembling, begged Ji-hoon to never try anything against Han. Ji-hoon, devastated, asked what he would do now that he'd lost his ability. The boy assured him that he still had plenty to live for and enthusiastically told Ji-hoon he would be joining the army. The memory fades, and in the present, the blonde's severed head is shown impaled on a bone spear held by Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon screams in grief over what he has done, but there's no time to process his emotions, as more monsters attack, prompting him to react and eliminate them. Meanwhile, in the president's office, the president demands, "What is that thing?" His secretary explains that it's the monster who eliminated the Kumkang Guild and the Japanese prime minister, and that he was the one responsible for the portal collapse. According to their investigation, they need to eliminate him to restore the gates to normal. The president asks why they are fighting each other, and his secretary replies that he doesn't know, but emphasizes that, regardless, even other monsters haven't been able to kill him. He adds that the Bloodgate's influence is spreading, and they cannot delay any longer. The president inquires about domestic hunters, but his assistant responds that they've all been annihilated, causing the president to worry. In the end, he orders them to seek help from foreign hunters. Elsewhere, someone asks if the monster that killed so many in Korea and Japan was the one responsible for causing the Bloodgate. He slams his spear into the ground, saying, "This will be interesting." This is Luan Jikwang, China's top-ranked hunter. In another part of the world, a woman complains about what she sees. She is Vladimir Rozana, Russia's #1 ranked hunter. Lastly, a man with tears in his eyes says he can hear the screams of those who suffer, and states that he must go. His assistant comments that if he does, the war will be over. The man, using his powers and destroying everything around him, declares, "It's over." This is Stephen Lucas, America's #1 hunter, and all three are now headed for Korea. For 5 years, Ji-hoon fought endlessly against creatures in the blood dimension, a brutal, otherworldly environment where food and sleep were impossible luxuries, and survival depended solely on combat. The unyielding battles took a toll on his sanity. Each time he lost control, his transformation into a monster advanced. But every time he felt himself slipping away, he'd remember his mother, lying helpless in a vegetative state, and the man responsible for her suffering. That searing rage helped him suppress the monstrous shift within him, even if only temporarily. Yet now he questions why he is on the verge of losing control. Has his resolve weakened since he achieved his revenge? Or has the blood dimension's magic itself grown more powerful, amplifying the monstrous force within him? He realizes he may not be able to keep his transformation at bay as he once did. In that moment, he resolves that if he can't be free of the blood dimension's influence, he will at least use his powers to eliminate every last creature within the portals. Perhaps then he can atone for the sins he's committed, some innocent lives taken, others transformed irreversibly by his presence. At that moment, a sharp impact shatters his head. His vision fades as he struggles to regenerate, his mind frantically pulling him back to reality. His enemy stands before him, preparing to attack again as Ji-hoon forces himself upright, readying for the next brutal assault. Meanwhile, on Earth, it was Christmas, the day the portals appeared. Inside a large church, a priest spoke to his congregation, reminding them of gratitude as the holiday season brought hope and renewal. But the moment of peace shattered when a massive portal materialized above the city. Without hunters, the people were defenseless, left to flee in terror. The priest urged everyone to evacuate, and his assistant begged him to leave with them. But the priest replied firmly, "You go first, I'll follow soon." At that instant, a monster emerged from the portal and locked eyes on the priest. Just as the beast lunged toward him, a blinding light enveloped the church, eliminating the monster in an instant. The stunned priest whispered, "Is this God's will?" This miracle marked the awakening of Stephen Lucas, the world's first SSS rank hero, who would go on to save the entire United States. Ji-hoon had idolized Lucas as a young boy, seeing him as the ultimate hero, a man who defended humanity against all odds. Now Stephen Lucas, America's #1 hero, had arrived in Korea. But Ji-hoon didn't have long to wonder why he was here. In an instant, Lucas struck Ji-hoon without hesitation, testing his strength against the monstrous figure before him. "So, you don't die easily?" Lucas remarked, observing Ji-hoon's regeneration. As Ji-hoon began to heal, Lucas cast a restrictive ability, immobilizing Ji-hoon. Panicking, Ji-hoon felt himself forced toward a red portal. But with a powerful effort, he threw himself out of reach, landing heavily on the ground. Lucas prepared another blow. Desperately, Ji-hoon shouted, "I'm not a creature." Lucas stopped, startled, and asked, "You're human." With difficulty, Ji-hoon asked Lucas to hear his story. As Ji-hoon recounted the harrowing journey that had led him here, Lucas's expression softened, and he wrapped Ji-hoon in an understanding embrace. "It's been hard, hasn't it?" he said quietly. "What's your name?" "Kang Ji-hoon," he replied. Lucas nodded, explaining that his mission had always been to protect humanity, but that he had taken many lives and bore the weight of those deaths. To atone for this, he tattooed their names onto his body. "I can help you fight these creatures," he offered, but then added gravely, "But know this, these red portals are opening everywhere. Many lives will be lost." Lucas apologized, carving Ji-hoon's name onto his body as well, before whispering, "I'm sorry," and preparing to eliminate Ji-hoon once more. Elsewhere, Sim Ji-hoon watched this scene unfold from the Hunter Association as she continued to tend to Ji-hoon's mother, drawing strength from the knowledge that Ji-hoon was still fighting. Meanwhile, in Russia, Vladimir Razana, the top hunter, scoffed at Lucas's bold choice to go to Korea alone. She thought him reckless, especially given his prowess in the recent war. Her irritation grew when she learned that her army had lost 80% of its strength and could no longer hold a defensive line. "It would be different if I could just capture the Arctic creature," she muttered angrily. Just then, a man entered, his presence commanding attention. "I'll capture it myself," he announced with certainty. It was none other than Han, ready to claim his own place in the escalating battle against the Bloodgate's horrors. The Arctic monster. The first of its kind had been an unparalleled threat, an SSS-class beast capable of unprecedented destruction. It emerged from a portal in the bleak Russian Arctic and with a single devastating strike obliterated the entire Russian Arctic base. Unprepared for the reality of magical creatures or the existence of portals, the Russian government scrambled, deploying every conceivable resource to confront the beast. Soldiers, artillery, and airstrikes bombarded the creature, but these conventional weapons merely glanced off it, leaving the monster unscathed. In a final, desperate measure, half of Russia's nuclear arsenal was unleashed, turning the northern territories into a radioactive wasteland. But even the destructive force of nuclear weapons was powerless against a creature infused with mana. Instead, the radioactive fallout transformed northern Russia into a desolate land infested with new monsters, further isolating it. In the wake of this catastrophe, Russia was left weakened, its resources stretched thin, leading to its eventual declaration of war on the United States to claim additional assets. Back in the present, Han stands confidently, declaring, "I'll eliminate that Arctic monster myself." Across from him, Vladimir Ryazana, Russia's #1 hunter, scoffs, raising an eyebrow at the young hunter's boldness. "A Korean S-rank hunter? And you think you can face it?" Her voice drips with sarcasm as she laughs at his audacity. "Showing up here, without permission. How foolish," she says, crossing her arms. Do you think an S rank has what it takes to face the Arctic monster? Or do you have a death wish? With a smirk, she unleashes her power, her aura radiating fiercely, causing the entire ground around Han to tremble and shatter under the sheer force. Yet Han remains undeterred. He mocks, "Oh, so you're here for that monster? Funny. Last I heard, you couldn't even stand up to the United States." He taunts, his words sharp and aimed to provoke. Vladimir's smile vanishes as her eyes narrow with cold fury. She questions him, "How do you plan to survive the radiation and reach the Arctic monsters?" Han, unbothered, raises a shield, a shimmering field of mana. But she merely laughs, unimpressed. That shield won't hold up to the kind of radiation we're talking about. Han's smirk deepens as he activates layers of additional defensive abilities, coating his body with a series of powerful shields and barriers. Vladimir's gaze sharpens as she watches him. "All right," she finally concedes. "If you somehow manage to kill the Arctic monster, I'll grant you 30% of the Mana Stone." "Not a penny more," she declares, with a cold finality. But Han just laughs and walks past her, advancing steadily toward the Arctic wasteland, the glow of his shields illuminating his path. Elsewhere, Stephen Lucas stands face to face with Ji-hoon, who begins to radiate light from within. Lucas's expression softens for a moment. "I'm sorry," he murmurs, "but I have to end this." He attacks Ji-hoon with a lethal blow, and in an instant, Ji-hoon's body disintegrates into dust, carried off by the breeze. Yet within seconds, the dust reforms, taking shape as an eye, then a bone, and finally, his entire body. Ji-hoon regenerates, looking up to meet Lucas's unyielding gaze. Ji-hoon, realizing the gap between their powers, feels a flicker of fear, but determination ignites within him as he lunges forward, thrusting a bone spear toward Lucas's face. The sharp edge embeds between Lucas's brows, but Lucas barely reacts, his calm eyes holding Ji-hoon's as he tightens his embrace. "If hurting me helps ease your heart, do it as much as you need," Lucas murmurs, pulling Ji-hoon closer. Once again, Ji-hoon's body turns to dust, and yet Ji-hoon regenerates, gritting his teeth in rage. Lucas, observing him carefully, wonders aloud, "Is your regeneration truly limitless?" Then he embraces Ji-hoon yet again, whispering, "I'll keep eliminating you." Painlessly, Ji-hoon struggles, his body reforming through excruciating pain. Memories of his ability flood back, exoskeleton manifestation, an ability that coats his skin in a hardened skeletal armor, but at an excruciating cost. Each regeneration is agony, every cell in his body searing with pain. He remembers his body breaking and healing again and again for the sake of revenge and hope. But Lucas's ruthless attacks, coming immediately after every regeneration, push him beyond any threshold of pain he has endured. The endless cycle of destruction and regeneration gnaws at his sanity, breaking him down. Here calls a memory from high school, when a classmate once asked him what his power was. When Ji-hoon had told him, exoskeleton, the boy had recoiled in disgust, muttering curses as he threw Ji-hoon to the ground. Now, enduring this unbearable pain, Ji-hoon wonders, why? Why do I have to suffer like this? What did I do wrong? As he rides in Lucas's arms, despair floods him, and he admits that Lucas may be right. Perhaps, by continuing to live, he condemns others to death. But then, he remembers his mother. "Even if I die, she will live," he tells himself. In a final burst of resolve, he begins to absorb energy from the red portals around them. The energy pulses through him, radiating outward as his body begins to glow with intensity. Seeing the change, Lucas prepares to counter. But before he can strike, Ji-hoon clenches his fist, channeling all the accumulated energy from the portal into one powerful blow. Lucas braces himself as the punch connects, the force sending shockwaves that ripple outward, visible even on live broadcasts throughout the city. Crowds gather, watching in stunned silence as the fight plays out on massive screens, Lucas's own son among them, his face pale as he watches his father struggle against the monstrous figure on screen. Inside the Korean Hunter Association building, Sim Ji-hoon, overexerted from continuously healing Ji-hoon's mother, collapses to the ground, her strength nearly spent. Her secretary rushes to her side, supporting her as she coughs, but Sim Ji-hoon looks up and gasps, the healing is finally complete. In a hospital room nearby, Ji-hoon's mother stirs as her eyes flutter open, the haze of her long sleep finally lifting. In Russia, a man sits in a dimly lit command room, monitoring the situation. The information reaches him. Ji-hoon is battling none other than Stephen Lucas, the SSS ranged hero of the United States. A smirk forms on Han's lip. "That bastard really has some guts," he mutters to himself, though a flicker of understanding crosses his mind. Despite their stark differences, Han reflects that their situations are eerily similar. Both have endured unspeakable suffering, both have tapped into powers that come at unbearable costs, and both are now considered monstrous threats by the world. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Jihoon's clash with Lucas continues to escalate. Having absorbed mana directly from the Red Gates, Jihoon emanates an aura of raw, ominous energy that even Lucas finds unsettling. Lucas, however, stands calm and resolute. That mana you carry, Lucas observes, it reeks of destruction, but even so, I'll shoulder your pain, I'll forgive you for your sins. But Jihoon has had enough. His crimson eyes burn with frustration as he snarls, I don't need your forgiveness. With a roar, he draws his bone blade and slashes at Lucas, aiming to silence his self-righteous preaching. The blade cuts cleanly through Lucas, but instead of blood, Lucas's figure vanishes into thin air, reforming a short distance away behind Jihoon, completely unharmed. Lucas smiles faintly. Most of the time he begins, his voice calm yet firm. Having someone to listen to your troubles helps. I'll be that person for you, Jihoon. Share your pain. I'll bear it with you. In a swift motion, Lucas drives his hand straight through Jihoon's skull, cracking it apart. For a moment, the battlefield falls silent, save for the sound of crackling energy. But Jihoon seizes the moment. Using his regenerative abilities, he traps Lucas's arm inside his head and retaliates, severing Lucas's arm at the elbow with the powerful slash of his blade. Lucas staggers back, momentarily stunned by the unexpected counter. Jihoon, though gravely injured, doesn't pause. The pain coursing through his body no longer bothers him. His mind is consumed by one thing: revenge. Blood streams from his broken head, and the severed hand lodged inside him begins to tear him apart further. Yet he pushes forward, his determination unbroken. Lucas watches him with an unreadable expression. This boy, he murmurs, his voice tinged with both respect and pity. He carries so much pain. When I gained this ability, I thought I understood suffering. I hear it constantly, the cries of people in agony, the hopelessness of famine, sickness, and calamities. Their voices never leave me. He pauses, his expression softening. But I also hear hope, gratitude, the joy of those who were saved. These voices, they remind me why I keep going. With a single deafening clap, Lucas summons a wave of divine energy, obliterating Jihoon's body into a mist of blood and ash. The ground shakes under the force of the attack, leaving a massive crater in its wake. Lucas straightens, breathing heavily. It's over, he whispers. But it isn't. From the crimson mist, Jihoon begins to reform, his regeneration faster and more powerful than ever. His exoskeleton emerges sharper and more jagged, his red aura flaring brighter. Lucas's eyes narrow as he realizes the extent of Jihoon's power, even if 1,000 hands drag him down. Lucas mutters, he'll keep rising. Jihoon lunges again, forcing Lucas to unleash another blast of divine energy. Once more, Jihoon is reduced to a pile of blood and bones, and once more he regenerates. Emerging from the destruction unscathed, Lucas clenches his fists. This boy, he mutters, he doesn't know when to stop. In a desperate bid to contain him, Lucas summons a glowing cross of light. The radiant symbol descends onto Jihoon, binding him in place. The divine energy floods Jihoon's mind, taking control of his body and forcing him to self-mutilate, piece by piece. He begins tearing himself apart, his movements mechanical and agonizing. Lucas watches intently, chanting under his breath. Through this, you will be free of your sins, he declares, his voice rising with fervor. The light grows brighter, driving Jihoon further into madness. Mangled and broken, Jihoon's body continues to tear itself apart, his screams echoing across the battlefield. But even in his agony, Jihoon begins to understand. This isn't salvation, he realizes, his thoughts cutting through the haze of pain. This is control, manipulation, fear. He recalls the faith Lucas's followers place in him and the respect he commands. It's not righteousness, it's fear, Jihoon concludes bitterly. Lucas isn't a saint. He's a snake, a deceiver who thrives on lies. Lucas's followers, oblivious to the truth, continue to pray, their voices filled with unwavering faith. The light intensifies, but Jihoon's resolve remains unbroken. I'll kill him, Jihoon growls through clenched teeth, no matter what it takes. In Russia, Han faces his own battle against the Arctic Beast, an SSS-class monster of immense power. The icy creature towers over him, its attacks relentless. Han struggles to hold his ground, blood dripping from numerous wounds. This bastard, he mutters, dodging a massive claw swipe. If I can't kill something like this, I'll never be able to kill Jihoon. Summoning every ounce of strength, Han pushes himself further. The thought of Jihoon fuels his resolve. I swore. He grits his teeth. I swore I'd kill that bastard with my own hands, and I will. Nothing remains of Jihoon but his indomitable spirit. The blood gates sense his unyielding will and respond, reviving him once more, slowly. His fragmented body regenerates, and with sheer determination, he uses the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on Lucas, using the sharp bones of his ribs as weapons. However, Lucas, ever vigilant, notices the attack just in time. With a powerful motion, Lucas grabs Ji-hoon mid-charge and slams him into a nearby building. The impact is catastrophic, shattering the structure entirely and sending debris flying in all directions. Ji-hoon's body crumples from the blow, and he falls through the fractured floors, landing in the dark, damp sewers below. As his shattered body regenerates once again, he looks ahead and freezes. There, standing amidst the dim light of the sewer, is his mother.